Yikes. This is a dark one. I guess we're doing it. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca. I eat books. Today, we are discussing books with climate anxiety. Thursday, April 22nd is Earth Day, and in celebration, I thought we would discuss books that are very aware of the impending doom, the end of the universe. That sounds like fun, right? So my understanding is that there is a genre called cli-fi, climate fiction, but I don't think that's what I'm talking about today. I think that cli-fi is science fiction-y, near future, dystopian, after some great climate crisis. I would say Oryx and Crake, The Road perhaps. Probably a lot more out there, but I don't read a ton of dystopian science fiction, so I'm not sure. I think there's tons of that. And if you were to Google climate books, you'd get a lot of recommendations for that. And then I think you would also get a lot of great nonfiction work. And we're not going to talk about either of those categories today. Today we're just going to talk about books that are anxious, take place in the now, and are very aware of the present day anxiety of impending doom. If you are interested in some of those other kinds of books, I think a great sci-fi that I don't think I see as much to talk about is Gold Fame Citrus by Claire Vaye Watkins. This takes place in the near future version of California in which there is absolutely no water. It's a good dystopian quest novel. So for me, as I think about Earth Day, I think about the books that take the anxiety that I feel, that I walk around with. I work to compartmentalize a lot of the year, but I feel it acutely as Earth Day approaches. Books are one of the ways that I deal with those emotions. I feel seen and heard and understood, and a sense of cathartic release when I read books with female characters who are also suffering with those thoughts and helpless feelings. So these are some of my favorite books that help me put into words those emotions around the end of the world. Oh. Yikes. All right, so the first book I want to talk about today is The Wall Creeper by Nell Zink. This is a really good, weird little book. I'm a big Nell Zink fan. She's a weirdo. I love it. So this book is about a character named Tiffany. She and her husband are both deeply flawed characters in different ways. The book opens with a miscarriage due to a car accident seeking a bird called a wall creeper. This sets off sort of an obsession with birds that turns into an obsession with the environment. These two completely not sympathetic in any way characters become essentially eco-terrorists. They get wrapped up with these environmental groups who have sort of zany ideas that are clearly not going to be successful, such as stopping hydroelectric sources from rivers in order to save wildlife. Clearly the assertion there is that the climate crisis is complicated and the solutions need to be thoughtful and deliberate. At this point, good intentions are not nearly enough. I also think that we are struck by the selfishness of these characters and the way that climate endeavors can be selfish. This is a satire of the way I think many of us feel a desire to seek solutions where there may not be a ton. It is dark and it is hilarious and it is weird. I would love if more people read this book and talked about it because it's a weird one, it's divisive. There are a lot of people who love it and a lot of people who hate it and not a lot of people who feel in the middle. I'm always gonna be in Camp Nell Zink. I really think she's a cool little weirdo. I would love to hear what other people think about this. This is a good one. It has nothing to do with climate, but this has a satisfying ending, which if you like weird little books but you get frustrated by a lack of closure, I think that this book does that really well. The next book I wanted to discuss is Florida by Lauren Groff. I did read Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff a few years ago and I was not blown away. Not a huge fan, but I do really enjoy her short fiction, and I really liked Florida. Florida is a collection of stories that either take place in or are tangentially related to Florida, where I believe Groff is from. I would say that a theme that runs through every story in the collection is just a sense of dread. If you live in a state that is literally being consumed by the ocean around it, being taken back by the water, fear is everywhere. You feel that in every story. Some of the stories make this climate-related dread more explicit, and some it's more underlying. Most of the stories in the book are narrated by women who are seeking different ways of addressing that dread and anxiety. There's a character who is literally trying to outrun it. This story collection is about being swallowed. Also, I think that a theme that runs through all of these books is motherhood. Motherhood is so intrinsically tied to climate anxiety because of this question of bringing a new generation into a burning world. The question of what future are you giving the next generation? So I think that we see that in lots of the Groff characters who are mothers. In The Wall Creeper, Tiffany, our protagonist, is contemplating procreating, and it is explicit in there about the discussion of the role of climate change in that decision-making process. I also wanted to discuss The Life of the Mind, which I mentioned in my March wrap-up. This book is much more about the question of having children than it is necessarily about climate, although there's a phenomenal climate anxiety scene in the beginning of the book, forever seared in my mind. The protagonist of this book, Dorothy, is imagining a future in which she is being mocked by what she refers to as the raft children, the future generation who survive on a raft. They're like, oh, you gave $10 a month to Greenpeace canvassers? You recycled? Thank you so much for what you did for us. During this passage, Dorothy says, in this imaginary argument with these raft children where she's trying to defend herself, she says like, well, this state of emergency is all you've ever known. You've only lived like this. I was told that all I had to do was work hard and follow my dreams. And the raft children respond, what is a dream? We're not familiar with the concept. So it's dark, which I like. This book is just anxiety. Part of that anxiety is climate anxiety. The next book I want to talk about is Weather by Jenny Offal. This book is very explicitly about climate anxiety. The main character, Lizzie, works for a scientist who has a climate change podcast. Her job is to respond to questions that this woman gets in the mail. As you can imagine, these questions are full of fear, concern, worst case scenarios. Lizzie becomes a little consumed by these fears. She starts to become a bit of a disaster prepper. Again, I think we see the world through her concern about her son in this book, her idea of the future that awaits her next generation, and this question of how motherhood and climate anxiety are intertwined. This book is great on this concept of dread in the multiple different layers. So we have the super macro dread of the end of the universe. We have sort of medium level dread about the upcoming election. There's a lot of election anxiety in this book. And then there's this micro familial dread about the future of her son, the safety and health of her brother in this book, who is an addict. So there's a lot of ways that this destruction of the earth is mirrored in different ways. Similarly to The Life of the Mind, there's a metaphor here about apocalypse of career. Lizzie's world personally seems to be falling apart. The world around her seems to be burning up, and she's not handling it well. And that's what we love to see, a woman who's crumbling. All right, the next book I want to talk about is Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. If you're familiar with this book, you might be like, come on, a little bit of a stretch, but hear me out. First of all, I love an excuse to talk about this book. This book is a masterpiece. This is Marilynne Robinson's first book, and then I think it was multiple decades between this and Gilead. I'm sure I've mentioned Gilead on here before because I talk about it all the time. This is a standalone Marilynne Robinson, and it is a true pleasure and delight. It tells the story of these two young girls who are abandoned by their family. They live in a fictional town called Fingerbone in what I believe is Idaho. They are taken care of by a succession of relatives and aunts. This book is absolutely concerned with nature. It is a naturalist book. One of the main plot devices is a flood. We see that. We're with you on that page, Marilynne Robinson. We get that. The housekeeping that is referenced in the title, I think, refers to, of course, like keeping a home clean, which is a recurring theme in the story, or the lack of housekeeping. I think also it refers to this idea of keeping a home, keeping a place that feels safe, feels like home, how you do that for yourselves and your loved ones. And then I also think it refers to stewardship of the earth, the housekeeping of the environment. I would love to hear from anyone else who has read this book, and if you think I'm really grasping at straws on this one. Also, if you just love this book, because this is a goodie. All right, my last book that just oozes anxiety and worry and dread is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. This is the story of a family in Mississippi who are preparing for the onslaught of Hurricane Katrina. The story does a great job building up to this incoming disaster with format. It takes place over the 12 days immediately leading up to the storm touching down. So each of the chapters are called the 3rd day, the 4th day, the 10th day, etc. This book does a great job of building empathy with that feeling that tragedy is coming. In many ways, it is here. Climate disasters already exist for many of us. This book reminds us what we already know, which is that climate disasters are felt and experienced, and the burden of them is felt first and worst by poor communities and communities of color. Of these books, this is the one that is most vividly within the storm. All right, so that was 6 books about protagonists, all women, who are not well. They're not doing well. When I think about Earth Day, I think that there was once a time when I was a naive, sweet little baby bunny who was really excited to get out the PSA about recycling and vegetarianism, and felt like Earth Day was a day for celebrating. And I am a dark, cynical, terrible human. Knowing that Earth Day is approaching another year makes me sad, scared, a sense of dread, worry, missed opportunity, anger, and regret. Those are some of the emotions I love to read about. Books about women who are walking around in their brains, and it's a hard place to be. Thanks for watching. I'm sure I missed a bunch. Let me know what I missed, because I know there's so many more. Also because I want to read them. Give me your books about anxious women. If you are into that more traditional cli-fi genre and you have some good recs for books about the end of the world, please let me know if I should read any of those. And if you came here feeling really hopeful and I just took a piss all over your parade, I really apologize. I commend you. You know, tomorrow I might wake up and feel that way. Today was feeling dark. All right, thanks for watching. Of course, I would love if you would comment, subscribe, come back for more dark, sad, depressing, terrible content.